So we'll get started. This is the final summary lecture that we'll be having. Finally done with this speech. Okay, so to review what a summary does, since we've only really been doing it like part by part. So the first thing that you have to do is like collapsing, or you don't have to collapse, but you probably should collapse. Like if you're running 3 contentions, you have to decide what to go for on your case and then also on your opponent's case, right? And then the second thing you should do is extend offense. So once you decide which contentions you're going for or which one contention you're going for, you're going to extend your case and then also any turns on their case that you do want to extend. And in order to extend your case, you also need to frontline, which just means defend your case against like your opponent's rebuttals, right? So you need to make sure to extend your offense, but also frontline. And then the next thing after extending offense is extending defense, which is basically reasons why your opponents don't win their case. And of course, your opponents, if they're like good debaters, they're going to respond to your argument, like to your rebuttals, right? They're also going to frontline. So in order to extend defense, you either have to point out that they don't respond to it, which is like why you're extending it, or you'll have to explain why your warranting is better than their frontline, right? Because if your opponents say, like, if your opponent's frontline, they're like, no, my opponents tell you, innovation goes down 20%, but it actually goes up 20%, and you just repeat like, no, it goes down 20%. Like the judge has no, like nobody is doing any warranting or comparison, so the judge doesn't know who to vote for, right? Because it's just 2 people like throwing numbers. So when you're extending defense, make sure to explain why your argument makes more sense than your opponent's. And then the last thing to do is weighing, which is giving the judge a reason why your arguments or just one contention is more important than theirs. And it's kind of like the big picture analysis. Like some teams do this really well, but some teams don't. Like it's like, oh, there's 2 worlds, one where like, I don't know, innovation goes down, accessibility goes up, things like that. So like it's like the big boom, like summarizing the entire round, in a simple way that people can understand. Okay, so what we're going to be doing today is practicing extensions, and then we'll pretty much be done. So, first, everyone should get out 2 sheets of paper and 2 different colored pens. And then I'm going to read 2 cases. So I'm going to read an AF case and I'm going to read a neg case. And it's still on the pharma topic. So the United States should impose price controls on the pharmaceutical industry. So I'm going to read an AF case and then a neg case. So y'all will need to flow the AF case on one paper and then the neg case on the other. Okay. Let me stop sharing. Does everyone have a sheet of paper yet? Maybe another second. Okay, we'll wait a second for everyone to get some paper. Yeah. And then make sure to flow well, because after I read the cases and we do some extensions on the case, Hannah is also going to read rebuttals against those cases. So make sure you're flowing well. Okay, is everyone ready? Okay, so I'm gonna start with the AF case. We affirm the U.S. federal government should impose price controls on the pharmaceutical industry. Contention 1 is industry domination. The current high prices of the pharmaceutical industry help perpetuate the dominance of current titans in the drug market. By allowing them to operate at massive profit margins, these industry Goliaths crowd out competition by buying out competition and aggressively expanding. Mergers are when companies buy other companies. The American pharmaceutical industry sees more merger and acquisition activity than any other industry, both in number of deals and the amount of money spent. These mergers are also dramatically increasing in frequency, especially amongst generic drug companies. According to NCBI in 2016, almost $2 trillion were spent on mergers by generic companies alone. According to Fortune 15, generic companies fund their acquisitions with debt. Rates and drug prices go up following a merger. Price controls solve for mergers by rendering large companies unable to raise drug prices on patients in order to regain the cost of mergers. Furthermore, by decreasing revenue, we are decreasing the excess profits that companies make so they can't acquire other companies. Global Health 18 cites several potential reasons for pharmaceutical companies pursuing mergers include gaining corporate control over a sector and buying out financially weak companies. This means that companies pursue mergers in order to gain more market share of a drug, resulting in industry monopolies. According to Brecker from the University of Norwegian Economics, price regulations would decrease their market share of these monopolies by 37%. In the status quo, this industry domination is decreasing innovation in three ways. As of now, the current boom of mergers is decreasing the number of companies in the industry by a drastic amount, resulting in what we see as a relatively non-competitive landscape, which can be made more dynamic through a reduction of mergers. NCBI 17 notes that several companies make industry sectors less competitive by cornering generic markets through M&As in order to substantially increase prices for numerous life-saving drugs. According to Harvard Business 14, innovation in the pharma industry is encouraged by more competition, which is made difficult with the current boom of mergers, but will be increasing in the AF. Secondly, according to Brookings Institute 17, the monopolistic setup of the pharmaceutical industry makes for a high barrier of entry for emerging companies in the drug sector, thus discouraging new potential entries for drugs and companies onto the market. Thirdly, aggressive expansion by pharmaceutical companies eats into money spent on innovation. Harvard 17 finds that merged companies have on average worse innovated output due to reductions in the R&D budget, while new evidence shows that merging companies' competitors also spend less on R&D after the merger. Hence, industry competition and innovation become less dynamic overall. By reducing industry monopolies through price controls, we will increase innovation beyond a point that the status quo can offer. Contention 2 is accessibility. Due to high drug prices, many Americans choose to skip prescription doses. According to Prescription Justice 17, 45 million Americans didn't fill or complete a prescription due to high drug prices, an increase of around 10 million since 2014. Drugs that have been released for decades and are life-saving and necessary, such as ceramicin and isuprel, have seen price hikes in the thousands of percents. Such price hikes are both outrageous and unreasonable. According to Brookings 17, prices of drugs are rising about 6.3%. Comparably, wages are growing at only 2.8%. Orphan drugs, which make up 47% of the pharmaceutical market, exhibit clear signs of price gouging where drug companies overcharge patients for drugs that could save their lives. According to Health Affairs Journal, most orphan drugs are priced at hundreds of thousands of dollars per patient, making it difficult to afford at all. Right now, drugs are already unaffordable to so many Americans, but as prices keep rising and rising, only more people are going to be struggling to pay for them. According to the FDA, not taking drugs as prescribed causes 30 to 50% of chronic disease treatment failures and 125,000 deaths per year. Inability to afford drugs will result in at least 4 million deaths every 30 years. The pharmaceutical industry as a whole will see more competition and innovative output under price controls while saving millions of lives. Thus, we are proud to affirm. All right. Is everyone ready for the Neg case? Yeah, and make sure to flow the Neg case on a separate sheet of paper with a different colored pen. Everyone good? Okay, I'll take that as a yes. My partner and I negate the resolution that the U.S. federal government should impose price controls on the pharmaceutical industry. Contention 1 is decreased market entry. Subpoint A is innovation. Jarvis 19 articulates the U.S. is innovating more productively as the last 3 years of drug innovation alone have been more productive than the last 2 decades. In the midst of this innovation boom is small biotech. Robinson 20 outlines that 63% of new innovative drugs are created in small biotech labs. However, Asham 14 writes that small labs rely on investors seeking a massive profit to fund their initial drug creations. Problematically, Medicare for All would Problematically, imposing price controls would kill investor confidence. Lovelace 19 finds that price controls would eliminate the incentive for investors to make huge initial investments. Nysen 15 corroborates that biotech investors fear pricing pressure the most because it adds risks and removes the ability to adjust prices so investors get paid. As a result, Cliff 18 writes that reducing investment directly correlates with less innovation in life-saving drugs. Small labs are unable to finance innovative research and collapse before they bring drugs to the market. Overall, Vernon 03 finds that price regulations will kill 70% of the industry's drug innovative output. The impact is lives. SACT 14 finds diseases inevitably mutate to become drug resistant within years, rendering past treatments ineffective. As such, treatments must be constantly innovated to keep death tolls down. Small biotech is critical, as McKenna 19 finds that 90% of companies doing drug resistant disease innovation are small biotech firms. Unfortunately, Friedman 20 finds without new treatments, the death toll of drug resistant diseases would reach 10 million every year by 2050. Subpoint B is negotiations. Price controls will decrease market entry due to long negotiation times. Capitol Hill 17 writes that price controls lead to drawn-out negotiations between the government and pharma companies. In America, the average medicine is approved 90 days quicker than in Europe and about a year quicker than in Canada. The European Union's 2017 data reports that 600,000 deaths occur in Europe alone because of wasted negotiation time, as well as decreased market entry. Contention 2 is generic drug shortages. If the government artificially implements price reductions in a product, pharmaceutical companies will earn less profit and will produce less of the drug, thereby leading to a drug shortage. First, according to Rockpoint Group 18, the number of suppliers of generic drugs has dwindled to only 6. By implementing price controls, we will decrease the number of suppliers even more, which puts everyone at risk of drug shortages. According to NIH 11, economic pressure on manufacturers can also lead them to maintain lower inventories of low-profit drugs or take them off the market. For example, in 2000, a shortage of diphtheria and tetanus toxoids occurred when one of the manufacturers discontinued these products because of low revenues. Generic drug manufacturers only make profit margins of 6% currently, so implementing price controls will reduce that tiny margin to nothing, forcing generic companies back out of the business. This is especially devastating because 88% of prescriptions are made up of generics. Furthermore, drug shortages can result in serious health concerns, as according to Business Insider 18, prescription drug shortages can cause health systems to use less effective drugs as substitutions or reduce doses and reserve supply for only those in emergent need. According to a national study by ISMP 18, 94% of respondents reported rationing or restricting drugs in short supply. Most hospitals were affected by at least one drug shortage daily. Price controls will only lead to more drug shortages, and those drug shortages will have adverse effects on the health of patients. Thus, we are proud to negate. All right. So.
Do you want me to?
Wait, give me a second. First, we're gonna do extensions. Why won't this go away? Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. So now, after listening to both cases, what I want y'all to do is write extensions for one of the AV cases contention. So you can either try and extend like mergers and acquisitions, which was contention 1 on the AV case, or you can try to extend accessibility, which was contention 2 on the AV case. So, yeah, just like extend the link. Make sure to extend the link, the warrant, and then the impact at the very least, right? Does anyone not know how to write an extension? Because if you don't, I can just like give an example with the neg case. Okay.
Wait, Ethan, are you asking about the second contention on the neg or the AF?
Yeah, the second contention on app was accessibility. Okay, so I'll give everyone 3 minutes to write an extension for one of the contentions on AF. So starting now. All right, y'all. It's been 3 minutes. So, does anyone want to go first? Okay, Juliana, can we hear yours first?
Wait, this is for the wait for the sorry, I'm stuttering a lot. For the accessibility for F, I think the first card was Prescription Justice 17. This is just for a clarification. Was it 4.5 million or 45 million? Just wondering.
Wait for the second contention.
Yeah, for accessibility.
I have it float as 45 million.
Yep.
So is it 4.5?
It's
No,
45.
45.
Oh, okay. Alright, so I guess, according to Prescription Justice 17, 45 million Americans lost access due to high drug prices. Drug prices have been increasing thousands of percent. According to Brookings Institution, prices are rising 6.5%, 2.8% of wages, with prices increasing more than twice the amount of wages. More and more people are unable to afford these drugs. Price controls will stop this. And according to the FDA, 135,000 deaths per year occur because people can't afford it. So price controls will stop this.
Yeah, that was pretty good. You got the uniqueness. I think because what we want to do when we make extensions, we want them to be as like short as possible. So I don't think you needed the Brookings card about how like it's growing faster than wages. Like I don't think you need to say that. I think you don't need to cite the evidence. You can just say, oh, like 45 million Americans don't have access to drugs, and currently the drug prices are outpacing like the growth of wages, which is why like the FDA finds 125,000 people are dying every year, but price controls will solve, right? So I think the shorter you can make it, the better it will be. But that was really good. Ethan, can we hear yours?
Okay. Drugs are life-saving and necessary, but they have seen price hikes that rose drug prices by 6.3%. Price controls would stop companies from raising drug prices and make drugs more affordable. The FDA says that this results in over 100,000 deaths per year.
Yeah, that was really good. Okay. And just make sure at the beginning of your like extensions, because the judge and your opponents don't really like know like which contention you're talking about. So make sure to say like, oh, you can extend my second contention. Just like say which contention you're on. But yeah. Okay, that was great. Is there someone else? Daniel, do you want to give Daniel Faith, do you want to give an extension?
No, because I accidentally signed out and I couldn't remember which email I used for this account. So I spent like 15 minutes scrambling to figure out how to sign in. So I have no clue what is going on.
Okay, that's okay. I just read 2 cases on F and Neg, and then so just get 2 pieces of paper out and 2 pens, and okay, so on F case, just write contention 1 is mergers. And the basic idea for that is just that, like, these drug companies have so much money and they can hike drug prices, which is why they can buy out other companies, which is bad because it decreases innovation. But like with price controls, we would decrease like mergers because they won't be that rich anymore. And then the second contention on F is just like drugs are expensive. You know, with price controls, they won't be expensive, so people can afford them.
All right, that makes sense. All right, thank you.
Yeah, and then for the neg case, contention 1 was just like innovation. Well, it was market entry. So the first subpoint is just that like, you know, making drugs is expensive and companies need money, but if you were to implement price controls, these companies would lose money and they can't innovate anymore. And then subpoint B was negotiation time, which is basically that like because the government and the companies have to negotiate for these drug prices, like it takes a long time, like perhaps a year. And then because of that, like people are dying because it's released slower onto the market. And then contention 2 on neg was just that like there's a lot of generic drug manufacturers, and if you put price controls on them, they'll just go out of business, which leads to a drug shortage. All right, so now that we summed it up, let's hear Hannah's rebuttal to both cases. So make sure to flow this. So Hannah's gonna do an AF rebuttal right now. So AF against neg. So she will respond to the neg case. So make sure to flow in a different color on the neg case flow. Where you flowed the neg case on the same sheet of paper, flow the rebuttal against the neg case.
Okay, is everyone good? Start on their first contention. They talked to you about biotech innovation. First, we would say that innovation into biotech is going to be non-unique, as Tabatai 19 finds that Chinese venture capitalists are the ones doing most of the investment into US biotech, but they invest in US biotech so that the drugs are sold on the Chinese market, the biggest biotech market, in order to solve China's health problems, not the US market. So insofar as the Chinese market always exists without price controls, investments is still going to pour in and drugs are still going to be made. Second, we would argue that this argument is historically untrue, as Senior 25, despite every single high-income European country having price controls, Europe is basically in a, quote, biotech renaissance. They raised unprecedented amounts of money in the past few years. Third, biotech isn't reliant on venture capitalists, as Friedman 19 finds that new infrastructure has brought down the cost of doing biotech dramatically, and Turrets 20 finds that biotech companies get off the ground with grants and public funding, university funds, and startup loans, not by venture capitalists anymore, which at the end of the day means that their contention has no impact. Finally, we would argue that their impact is non-unique at the end of the day, as WHO 18 finds that only 4 pharma companies have active antibiotic programs, and only 12 antibiotics have been approved since 2000, because constantly innovating new drugs to catch up with AMR evolution isn't possible in the short or long term, since the drugs can't be used on a wide scale without creating more resistance. So we would argue that venture capitalists are going to recognize that, and they won't invest anyways because their main motive is getting profits. On the second contention, they talked about negotiations. First, they give you this empiric about the EU. We would say that the EU has 28 member states. Of course, negotiating with them is going to take a lot of time, and there's no indication why this number is applicable to the United States. Also, they talk about EU and Canada having long wait times and negotiation periods, but these countries also have things like universal healthcare and have to negotiate for distribution, administration, etc., while the resolution is only talking about controls on the pricing, which is a small portion of the negotiations in other countries. So we would argue that the negotiation periods aren't actually going to be that long. Finally, they give you this impact about 600,000 people dying. The evidence is by a random journalist and citing a study from the EU that talks about literally all avoidable deaths in the EU, but nowhere in the evidence does it indicate it's talking about drug negotiations. It's talking about if Europe had just had like better care and better health interventions, which at the end of the day is not what negotiations are. Finally, let's take a look at the third contention. They talk about generic shortage. First, this argument doesn't really make a lot of sense. If the majority of the market is demanding drugs, it's really unclear why the generics would have to lower the price in the first place, because the assumption of the case is that brand name drugs are of limited volume, so the lack of production in generics will cause shortages and deaths. But if there's a limited volume of brand name drugs, people are forced to buy the generics no matter what, so there's not really a warrant why generics have to lower prices in order to get more people to buy them. People have to buy them anyways. Second, the drugs that are targeted the most by price controls are drugs on patented drugs, because those are the ones with the highest prices, since these generics serve as a form of competition for previously brand name drugs, right? So the drugs on patents are the ones with the highest prices. They're the ones who will see the greatest reductions in prices under price controls. So at the end of the day, there's no warrant why generics would be hit hard by price controls, because right now, like brand name drugs that are off patent are already low priced. Finally, it's non-unique, as generics are going to disappear from the market anyways, as Pavola 18 gives 2 reasons why. First, profitability for standard generics is rapidly decreasing, and second, pharmacy benefit managers that control 90% of the market are consolidating to demand unsustainably cheap prices from generics, which are causing financial crises in generic producers at the moment. What that means is that if generics go bankrupt in either world, there's no reason to vote to prevent it, because at the end of the day, these companies are already going bankrupt because their prices already are getting pushed too low. So there's no reason to
Sheesh. Wow. Okay. And Hannah, actually, for the AF rebuttal, for the neg rebuttal, can you also frontline for neg?
I don't. Let me see. I don't even know how to frontline this stuff.
Just make stuff up.
Let me give me like 30 seconds to prep.
Yeah.
Wait, y'all actually like wrote blocks freshman year?
This is from Medicare for All.
Oh.
Because there's like a price control, like
we did have a little bit of blocks freshman year.
Yeah, I was like freshman year I had no blocks at all. Oops. Wait, after Hannah gives rebuttal, we're planning on having people extend through the rebuttals, right?
Yeah.
Or okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna be frontlining first. Frontline our C1.
Yes. So everyone make sure to get the other colored pen that you flowed your neg case in. And then start on the neg case paper where you flowed the neg case, and then Hannah's gonna read front lines. And then after that she's gonna respond to the AF case. So then flow her rebuttals against the AF case on the AF case paper.
Wait, so what?
Okay, so basically Hannah's gonna she is doing the neg rebuttal, okay? So she's gonna frontline her own case. So she's gonna frontline the neg case, and then she's going to respond. She's gonna refute the AF case. So
which
what you
do we
need
write this on?
So when she frontlines, you need to write it on the neg case paper, but when she starts refuting the AF case, you go to the AF case paper.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Oh my
Wait,
god.
and also which pen are we supposed in?
The pen that you flowed the neg case in.
Yeah, I'm neg right now. Is everyone good? start on our first contention on biotech. On their first response, they say Chinese venture capitalists are doing most of the investment. I read the article. The article does not say that China's the biggest biotech market, is the third biggest after US and India, the US being the first. So we would argue that if the US suddenly disappears from the market, it's going to have this huge impact. Also, the article talks about Chinese venture capitalists investing into cancer technologies and stuff, not AMR technology specifically, which is our impact. Next, they say it's untrue because Europe is in a biotech renaissance. The article doesn't actually say that. They took the title and it says Europe's in a biotech renaissance. But the article actually talks about how Europe has the potential to become a biotech renaissance. But we would argue that the reason why the U.S. is the #1 innovator of AMR drugs currently right now is because we don't have price controls. Finally, they say biotech isn't reliant on venture capital. The Friedman evidence talks about how these are possible options, but we would argue the majority of funding still comes from venture capitalists because you need 10 billion. You're not going to get 10 billion university funds, but also you can't access a lot of things like startup loans if you don't if they don't think that you'll make a return either. So we would argue that our link into here, which is decreased increased risk that you won't make back the money, also takes out the access for small biotech companies to access these funding mechanisms. Finally, they say the impact is not unique. The impact evidence clearly says that one, it is solvable insofar as new drugs come out. But second, the impact evidence also talks about how 90% is done by small biotech. So the WHO evidence only talks about the 4 big pharma companies that are involved. But we're not talking about pharma companies. We're talking about biotech companies. And we would say that investors are always going to invest because there's a demand, right? So insofar as it's a big issue, there's always an opportunity to make money because they're going to sell the drugs. Let's take a look at their case. First, I talked to you about how mergers are bad. We would argue that mergers and acquisitions actually increase in the app because they're super profitable, right? That's why companies do it. When you cut their profits, companies would have to double down on what makes them money. And because investors recognize that mergers make them money, they'll continue to do them. But second, we would argue that Des in 07 finds that when revenues fall, more companies merge as an attempt to salvage the remaining profits and escape financial panic. So overall, these companies are still going to merge together. And finally, when you decrease the profit of companies, they sell themselves for cheaper, which makes it easier to merge and acquire companies. For example, the small biotech that the Neg case talks about will become less valued, forcing the valuation of these small companies lower and allowing big biotech to buy them up. Finally, you turn it because mergers are really good for innovation, as Alvaro 25, because it's so expensive to generate a working drug. Companies need 10 billion in revenue annually to achieve growth and bring their drugs to the market in the first place. As a result, she finds that M&As provide companies the means to access new revenue streams, and acquisitions by large companies guarantee to investors that small companies that their investments will see returns, and guarantee to biotech founders that their drugs have a path to the market. So overall, declines in acquisitions means less people taking the risk to develop the drugs in the first place, which means overall less drugs, less innovation. On their second petition, they talk about access. First, Vero 10 finds that price controls create law negotiation. Actually, this is our case, so never mind, scratch that. Even if they win 100% of their argument on increased affordability, we would argue that AMR and biotech innovation still outweighs affordability for 3 reasons. First, on a prerequisite, it doesn't really matter if these drugs become affordable if new drugs stop being developed altogether. You can't really buy drugs that don't exist. Second, on scope, when they impact only to 10% people, we would argue that 10 million people dying is a lot bigger. And and finally, their evidence at the bottom doesn't specify how many drugs are because of unaffordability. It gives multiple causes to non-adherence to prescriptions like miseducation, and says that people who order meds just take less doses than they should. So at the end of the day, it's really unclear what the impact of this contention is. You don't know how many lives you're saving, but you do know that 10 million people are going to lose access to AMR drugs when you negate.
All right, so we are going to do a AF summary. So y'all already wrote extensions for one of the contention on AF, right? And you don't have to necessarily go for the one that you wrote extensions for, but you can use that one if you do decide. So what you need to do, since you guys are on the AF, you're going to need to extend one of the contentions on the AF case, and after you extend, you give the link and the impact, you're going to need to frontline what Hannah said, and then you're going to need to extend some defense on the Neg case.
Okay, wait, I think first, maybe some people missed some of that speech. So if you have any questions about arguments that were made, feel free to ask them now. Because like I know Ethan, you said that you were lost for like 80% of that. Kind of interested as to what you like missed, what you heard, etc.
Yeah.
So we could like fill in gaps.
I can send my speech doc in the chat.
You should probably
That
do
might be helpful.
Okay, hold on. Let me delete this stuff I didn't read.
Wait, what was that entire thing that you're talking about with mergers? I mean, sorry, not mergers. With the generics.
Which side?
I think just now it was I don't know.
Wait, was it
you were-
responding to the first or was it like extending the first negative contention, or was it responding to like accessibility?
She was responding to her own rebuttal for a neg. I don't know.
Oh, on biotech?
I think
went
underneath biotech when you're talking about the generic companies. I think I might have missed.
I didn't frontline that. I didn't frontline anything besides biotech.
Oh, okay. And also, what were you talking about with your turn? When you were rebutting against the AF case, I think.
I'll just send it in the chat. Hold on.
I think the turn was like when you have like companies losing profits, they're incentivized to mergers are good for friggin' innovation, which is like outweighs.
Okay, all the responses I read are in the chat. It's not like divided, but you can sort of tell which one's AF and which one's Neg.
Okay, so to help y'all out, I actually do a neg summary first, even though neg should be speaking second. So I'll just give an example, and then I'll do everything that is needed. Yeah. Just give me a second to...
Wait, honestly, why don't we have people like try do it first and then give feedback? Because we only have 15 minutes.
That's true. Does anyone want to try it?
Or yeah, try give it like a summary speech.
Not trying.
It's okay if you like totally bomb it. Like that's the entire point. Because like it's better to like bomb it, I guess, like here than like bomb it in like a hypothetical round. Like
The thing is that I essentially wasn't able to keep track of like all the cards that they mentioned. So like I would attempt to like write down like the card names and then write down like what they were trying to say, but by the time I figured out like how I was going to attempt to spell what they like the name, I wouldn't catch like whatever the card was saying.
Honestly, I never flow card names.
yeah, same.
Yeah, it's like if you just write, like I think a lot of PF is very analytical, right? You're sort of debating the warrants, right? So like the card, like the name isn't really the important part. It's more of what the name is saying, right? So flowing card names isn't really like a necessary thing because like honestly, like if you just make up a name, like people will accept it.
And you can also like the way you address like evidence generally is like on their point about biotech rather than like on the specific author card, unless you're like specifically indicting the author. Because like especially at like faster speeds, it's impossible to flow author tags well. Or like author names.
Okay, it's just that Nicole always seems to do that.
No, I mean
Yeah,
it's like good practice, but especially if you have trouble flowing them, you should just not flow them and then like
Yeah, it's,
slowly
like, not the
ease your way
priority.
into it. Yeah, it's definitely not the top thing that you should be flowing.
Yeah, the argument's more important, but I just like emphasize the author name because like this is just like a flowing drill, right? Like a lot of what we do is a flowing drill, and it's like the more you can get down, the better. But like just because you don't have the author name doesn't mean you can't read the evidence, right? It's not like if you just tell them like, oh, pharma 17, extend pharma 17 and prescription 18, like your judges will have no idea, right? Like it's the actual argument that matters more. Not the cards. Not the card name, I mean.
Okay, so I probably wouldn't do it today simply because there's some stuff that I just wasn't able to get done because I was too focused on card names, which I won't do next time.
If you open the file in the chat, it has all the responses I read.
Oh, then like what about the case?
Oh, did you
I don't
not
know
get
about
the case down? I thought
Well, I think it was mostly for the case. Well, and also for the rebuttals. But well, how do summaries work anyways? Like do you just essentially repeat everything that Hannah was saying?
Basically, and then you need to do some weighing and some frontlining. So
Yeah, so you
Nicole
go
already...
for
No, sorry, not Nicole. Didn't Hannah already do some weighing or something?
yeah, she did do some weighing, and then you can just extend that weighing if AF doesn't respond to it. So I just pasted the cases in the chat. So how about this? Since most people are like kind of confused right now or don't want to give one, I can give one first, and we can just yeah. So I'll give an AF summary. Let me just pull
Do we
up.
have to float that?
you
Yeah.
should try to.
I'm gonna first go on my case, then the weighing, and then their case.
Yeah. So that's why kind of extensions are important in summary, is because it's just like selecting what you want to go for and then explaining it. As well as like necessary responses and weighing.
Are extensions the hardest to flow? Because, I mean, they're talking a lot less and more concisely.
I think extensions like are easy to flow because it should just be stuff that they've already said. So like you can kind of just
Honestly,
be
when
like,
I flow extensions, it's like I just write extend and then like biotech, and then I just like ignore what the everything else they say.
yeah, because usually they'll be extending like a whole ass section of their case. So you'll probably kind of know what the argument they're making is because they've already read it. And then you just want to flow the extensions to, or flow the responses to your responses. You generally don't have to flow like the entire extension word for word.
Yeah, so I generally like don't flow what they're saying when they're just extending their case, but we usually only flow like when they're responding to things that you've said or extending things against your case. But what I do is like if they don't extend their impact or something, I usually write it down so I can like make fun of them for the judge, right? I'm like, oh, judge, you came a vote for them because they didn't extend their link or their impact or whatever. So I do make a note if that does happen. But usually it doesn't happen. So okay. Give me 1 second. Okay. All right. Is anyone not ready? Okay, this is gonna be kind of bad because I wasn't really flowing, so I'm just like I was looking at both the speech doc. So let my time begin now. The first way you can vote for us today is on industry domination, our first contention. We tell you that right now, drug companies are spending billions and billions on mergers and acquisitions. Luckily, price controls can stop that by stopping them from raising their drug prices following a merger and also stopping them from having such excessive profits that they can do this in the first place. That's why Brecker from the University of Norwegian Economics finds that price regulations would decrease the market share of these monopolies by 37%. And this is really important because monopolies are decreasing innovation in three ways. First, because they make industry sectors less competitive since they have more of a market share and there's less companies overall. But then second, they also make barriers to entry for small companies, which we would say is literally the reason why small biotech firms are having such large problems right now. And then third, because there's less companies and there's less competition, people spend less on R&D after the merger. First of all, because the merger was so expensive, but then second of all, because they also have less competition. So overall, you see innovation decreasing. Now, the first thing my opponents say against this, you can group their first two responses, which is that turns, which just says that companies will increase. No, you can just stick all the first three turns they read, which is basically saying that mergers would actually increase when we decrease their profits. We would say that's completely false, right? We give you the evidence from Brecker that tells you monopolies actually decrease 37% with price controls, and it's impossible for them to continue to do mergers because they, first of all, have no money. And second of all, they have no way to fund it. So even if companies are selling themselves for less or they want to do it more, they have no ability to do it more. Yeah. And then on the fourth turn that my opponent reads that mergers are good for innovation, we would say that's completely false, that companies need so much money to do this in the first place. We would say the reason why is because there's barriers to market entry, which is literally caused by the monopolies in the market in the first place. So we would say once you decrease these monopolies, we're the ones decreasing the prices of the cost of creating a drug in the first place. And then on the weighing that she does about innovation, we concede to it. We agree that innovation is the most important thing in the round, but we would tell you why our first contention outweighs their first contention on their case in terms of innovation is because we tell you monopolies are the reason why, first of all, producing drugs is so expensive. There's less small biotech firms. And third of all, we tell you that we have three links into innovation, whereas they only have one. But let's look at why they're not winning their case. So specifically on their only contention of biotech that they extend, we would tell you that biotech is really unimportant because it isn't reliant on venture capital, because Friedman 19 finds the new infrastructure has brought down the cost of doing biotech dramatically, and Tertis 20 finds that biotech companies get off the ground with grants and public funding, university funds, and startup loans. So we would tell you they literally don't need the innovation or the price, the prices of drugs that they're trying to tell you. But even if you buy that, we would tell you the impact is non-unique because their evidence is literally talking about the status quo, how 10 million people will die every year by 2050. We tell you the amount of AMR innovation right now is just impossible for us to save all of those lives. The only way where you can actually see it go up is in our world. Okay, that was a pretty bad summary because I was tripping, but yeah. So I extended my case, right, and then I frontlined, and then I talked about the weighing that Hannah did, and I kind of weighed my own case too, and then I extended defense. So usually that's how it's gonna go, right? You're gonna extend your case, you're gonna frontline, you're gonna weigh, and then you're gonna go on to their case. All right. Before y'all go, can y'all drop the pictures of your flows in the chat so we can give some feedback, and then
Wait, also, one note is former, I don't know if she's still it wants to be affiliated with this program, but Lisa Weber has decided to host a middle school tournament. And listen, this is kind of I know we've said signing up for tournaments in the past, and it didn't actually work out because logistical issues, and Lisa kind of abandoned us. But this one is going to be you're actually able to go if you are interested, and we can definitely find you a partner even if you're by yourself or don't want to partner with other people going from here. So it's definitely like an opportunity to actually debate. It's going to be on the 16th of next month, I believe. And it's going to be on the topic that we're already talking about, which is like the pharmaceuticals topic. So you'll already have like some kind of an understanding of the topic. We can help you out with writing cases, writing arguments, etc. if you're interested in that and feel like you don't have time. But it's a really good way to like kind of get some experience doing debate. So if any of y'all are interested in that, please like speak up or DM me or like whatever on Teams.
Yeah, is anyone interested here?
Dang, well, that's unlucky.